Let's go now to Wellington, where the Green Party co-leader is standing by, Russel Norman. Good morning, Dr Norman. Thank you for joining us this morning. So the government's going back to surplus. You say because it's gifted tax cuts to the wealthy. So what does that mean? What do the Greens stand for? Tax hikes?
I think the whole debate is problematic. So, like the graph you showed earlier, you said New Zealand's going into surplus. Actually, New Zealand is rapidly going into a massive deficit. And the confusion is between the government's financial position and the nation's financial position. So all the headlines have been around the government returning to surplus at some time in the future. But if you look at the current account deficit numbers, we're currently 5% in deficit, and under the budget projections it'll be 6.5% by 2017. That means that we're spending $10 billion more than we're earning, so we're losing $10 billion a year. By 2017, under Bill English's budget, we'll be losing $17 billion a year. If this was a corporation, right, and if you think of New Zealand Inc. as one big economic entity, currently we're a loss-making entity to the tune of $10 billion a year. The Chief Financial Officer, Bill English, has just put out his business plan, and under his business plan, our losses increased to $17 billion a year by 2017. He's proposing to cover those losses by borrowing, increasing our net borrowing to $208 billion. It's a very bad plan.
You would impose then, let's just focus on taxes for a minute, you would impose a higher rate of tax then, presumably?
Not necessarily.
Really?
And I actually think that if you just talk about the surplus, you are missing the most important picture.
Well, no, we have been discussing the current account deficit. We've raised that both with David Parker and with Bill English as well, and we do understand that the issue is there. So how would you fix it then? How are you going to encourage New Zealanders to save?
Well, the way to think about it is the tradable versus the non-tradable sector. Bill English used to talk about the tradable versus the non-tradable sector. The tradable sector of our economy is the internationally competitive sector, not just those that export, but those that compete with imports. Now, what happened, and Bill was right about this, is the tradable sector flattened off after 2005 and the non-tradable sector kept growing, which produced these massive deficits. And he said he was going to fix it. But actually in the last quarter last year, the tradable sector once again contracted. And so we're getting exactly the opposite of what we need if we are to have a sustainable economy. We need to focus on the tradable sector. Our policies are all about supporting the tradable sector so that we can deal with the deficit that we're running as a country. Because if we continue to borrow hand over fist, which is what we're doing at the moment, in the long run we will be the much poorer for it and we won't own our country.
Isn't the issue here is that we have to essentially import capital and we have to pay back taxes and dividends on that capital?
Well, if you're running a very large current account deficit like us, we're $10 billion a year short. There's only two ways to cover it. You borrow money or you sell assets. That borrowed money has to be serviced. We have to pay the interest on that money in the future, and those assets that we sell, not just the government assets, but all of the assets that we sell, like the land, or the profits from those assets go overseas. So they compound our problem further down the track. So we're going down a strategy of every year running these massive deficits as a country, borrowing or selling assets worth $10 billion a year. Bill English comes along and says, I've got a great plan, we're going to make it all worse. According to his own projections, I've put all the data on my Facebook page, you can read all about it there, but according to his own projections, it's going to get worse. And somehow we're told this is a success.
Where would you get the capital from, Dr Norman? Where would you get the capital from? This is, how do we generate it?
Well, what we need to do is focus on the competitiveness of the tradable sector. That has to be how we get out of the hole we've got ourselves in. That means things like reducing electricity prices to businesses. That's what NZ Power is about, driving efficiency through that sector. It's about driving efficiencies through the non-tradable sector like the financial services sector. That's what Kiwi Bank's about, so that we means that the tradable sector can perform better. It means that in our primary sector, which is our key export industry, we need to work with our exporters in that area to own more of the value chain, both in the fishing industry and the dairy sector. It means in manufacturing, working with them, particularly around government procurement, so that they get scale that they need. In the ICT sector, we need to have a cornerstone investment in a second cable so that the ICT sector in New Zealand can grow. Those are the kinds of things that government can do to help the tradable sector.
Given all this, the general consensus is New Zealand's in pretty good shape. Our economy is looking pretty good at the moment.
That's right, and that's because the debate is grossly misinformed. So if you just look at the government surplus, it looks good.
Okay.
But if you look at the real numbers underneath it, New Zealand, according to the IMF, right, New Zealand is the second worst current account deficit in the OECD to the end of their projection period, 2018. The only one worse than us is Turkey. Everyone else, the average current account deficit across the OECD is less than 1% of GDP.
Okay.
We are an absolute outlier within the OECD on this question. We are spending more than we earn every year. This year we spent $10 billion more than we earned, underbilling this budget. In 2017, we will spend $17 billion more than we earn. That's the key issue.
Thank you. Dr. Norman, thank you. Appreciate your time this morning. We get more information on your Facebook page, co-leader of the Greens.
Thanks, Rachel.
Appreciate your time.